I used to think hard work was enough to get recognized, until they erased my name from $1 million project I'd bled for, the one I'd sacrificed weekends, relationships, and my sanity to perfect. When I found out, I didn't scream, I didn't sue, I didn't even slam the door on my way out. I just smiled, sat back down at my desk, and started counting. 14 days. That's all I needed to take back what was mine, and then some. My name is Madeline Rhodes, and for 6 years, I was the invisible backbone of Orrin & West's most profitable division. 32 years old, single by choice, and living in a glass-walled condo overlooking downtown Ridgeport, Colorado. I'd built my life around precision. 5:30 a.m. workouts, black coffee, and 12-hour days dissecting financial models that made other analysts' eyes bleed. The thing about being exceptional at your job is that sometimes you become too valuable to promote. They need you right where you are, churning out the analyses that make them look brilliant in boardrooms you're never invited to. I was the one they called when deals went sideways, when numbers didn't add up, when they needed someone to work through Christmas to save a merger. And I did it. Every single time. Orrin & West prided itself on being progressive. Best workplace for women, 3 years running, according to some magazine that clearly never spent time on our floor. The investment consulting firm's Denver office was a monument to masculine ego dressed up in diversity initiatives. Glass offices for the partners, all men. Motivational posters about teamwork hanging over cubicles filled with women doing the actual work. My desk sat in the corner of the 34th floor, positioned perfectly to avoid the constant golf recaps and bourbon recommendations that dominated Monday mornings. I'd learned early that invisibility was a survival skill here. Let them think you're just another quiet, hard-working woman who's grateful for the opportunity. Never let them see how much you actually understand about their games. The merger and acquisitions team was my domain, though you'd never know it from the org chart. Officially, I was a senior financial analyst, a title that hadn't changed in 3 years despite handling deals worth more than some small country's GDP. My boss, Richard Holbrook, had mastered the art of presenting my work as collaborative team efforts, always careful to use "we" when discussing my strategies with clients. Madeline's got that rare combination, he'd told someone at the holiday party last year, thinking I couldn't hear. Brilliant but not ambitious. Perfect for the long haul. Not ambitious. I'd almost laughed into my champagne. What he meant was controllable, grateful, unlikely to cause problems. The office hummed with its usual energy, phones ringing, keyboards clacking. The occasional burst of male laughter from the break room where they gathered to discuss their fantasy portfolios and actual portfolios with equal fervor. I knew every tell, every pattern. Who stayed late, appearance, not productivity. Who actually closed deals, surprisingly few. Who took credit, predictably many. I documented everything in my head, not out of paranoia, but out of habit. In finance, patterns matter. And the pattern at Orrin & West was clear. Women did the work, men got the glory. And everyone pretended this was meritocracy in action. The January air in Colorado was brutal that year, but I barely noticed the cold anymore. My life had contracted to a narrow corridor between my condo and the office, with occasional detours to the gym where I ran on treadmills going nowhere. A perfect metaphor I was too busy to appreciate. I believed in the system. That's the part that makes me cringe now. Despite all evidence to the contrary, I actually believed that eventually, merit would win. That the next project, the next success, the next perfectly executed analysis would be the one that finally got me a seat at the table instead of just preparing the documents for it. The Steinberg merger should have been my breakthrough. 8 months of 18-hour days, creating financial models so elegant and precise they could make a CFO weep. I'd identified synergies worth $300 million that everyone else had missed, restructured the debt approach to save another $50 million, and navigated regulatory hurdles that had killed similar deals. "This is your moment, Madeline," Richard had said, actually looking me in the eye for once. "The board is going to want to meet the architect of this deal." I'd bought a new suit. Black, of course, Anything else would have been trying too hard, but perfectly tailored. I'd even practiced my presentation in the mirror, stripping away any uptalk, any apologetic language, any trace of the gratitude they expected. That was 3 weeks ago, back when I still believed that playing by their rules would eventually let me win their game. How naive, how utterly, embarrassingly naive. The email arrived at 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I remember because I was in the middle of finalizing the regulatory compliance section when the notification popped up. Richard wanted to see me in his office. Now, Brett Malin was already there when I walked in, lounging in the leather chair like he owned it. Which, technically, his family did own about 12% of the firm, a fact he managed to work into every third conversation. Harvard MBA, of course. Joined the team 4 months ago as a strategic consultant, which translated to, someone's nephew needs a job. Madeline, great work on the Steinberg deal. Richard started, not meeting my eyes. That should have been my first warning. Really exceptional analysis. Thank you. I've prepared the board presentation for Thursday. About that, Richard shuffled papers on his desk. We've decided to make some adjustments to the team structure. Brett will be taking point on the final presentation. The words hit me like cold water, but I kept my face neutral. I see. And my role? Supporting documentation, Brett interjected, that lazy smile spreading across his face. You're so good with the details, Madeline. We need someone we can trust to handle the back end. Back end. 8 months of my life reduced to back end support. The board specifically requested to meet the deal architect, I said, voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. They'll be meeting the team leader, Richard clarified. Brett's experience with high-level stakeholders makes him the natural choice. Brett's experience? 4 months of showing up late, leaving early, and asking me to explain basic derivatives. That experience. I found out the rest through Emma in HR, who whispered the truth over drinks 2 days later. The internal report had already been filed. Brett Malin was listed as lead strategist. My name appeared once, on page 47, under additional contributors. They had to file it early for compliance, Emma said, not meeting my eyes. I thought you knew. The presentation to the board went exactly as I'd imagined. Brett stumbled through my slides, mispronouncing amortization and confusing basis points with percentages. But he did it with confidence, with that particular brand of male certainty that makes boards nod approvingly. When questions arose about the complex restructuring model, he deflected smoothly. I'll have my team send over the detailed calculations. His team. I watched from the back of the room, having been invited to attend in case technical questions arose. They didn't let me speak once. The deal closed the following Monday. $1.2 billion acquisition, smooth as silk. The financial press called it a masterclass in creative financing. Brett's photo ran alongside the article. He was quoted extensively about his innovative approach and fresh perspective. I read the article in my office, door closed, hands steady on my desk. Around me, I could hear the celebration starting. Champagne corks popping, Richard's booming laugh. Someone mentioned bonuses, and Brett's voice carried over the rest. Well, it's not about the money. It's about building something great. Not about the money. Easy to say when your trust fund generated more in a month than I made in a year. Karen from accounting stopped by my desk later. Heard you did most of the work, she said quietly. That's fucked up. Madeline. I smiled, the same smile I'd perfected over 6 years. It's a team effort. She gave me a look that said she wasn't buying it, but what could she do? What could any of us do? The machine kept running, grinding up our work and spitting out their success stories. That night, I sat in my condo, staring at the city lights. I'd given them everything, every weekend, every late night, every ounce of creativity and intelligence I possessed. I'd played by their rules, stayed quiet, stayed grateful, stayed in my lane, and they'd erased me. Not just from credit, but from existence. Like I'd never been there at all. I opened my laptop and began typing. Not a resignation letter, That would come later. This was something else. A timeline, a record, a map of every deal, every model, every innovation I'd created that bore someone else's name. The rage had crystallized into something sharper, colder. They'd made a mistake, treating me like I was invisible, because invisible people can move through systems undetected. They can see things, access things, understand things that others assume are beyond their reach. 14 days. That's what I gave myself. 2 weeks to transform 6 years of invisible brilliance into something they couldn't ignore. Something they couldn't erase. I closed my laptop and poured myself a glass of wine. Outside, snow began to fall on Ridgeport, covering everything in pristine white. Perfect. I'd always worked better with a clean slate. Day 1. I arrived at the office at 5 a.m., 2 hours before my usual time. The building was empty except for security and the cleaning crew who nodded at me with the familiarity of people who recognize their own kind. The invisible ones who make everything run. I'd spent the night mapping out what I needed. Not revenge in the traditional sense. I wasn't going to leak client data or sabotage deals. That was amateur hour. And more importantly, illegal in ways that would hurt me more than them. No. I needed something elegant. Something that used their own greed against them. The beauty of being ignored for 6 years is that nobody questions your access. My keycard opened doors it probably shouldn't. My login credentials had accumulated permissions like barnacles on a ship's hull. It never audited longtime employees, especially quiet women who never caused trouble. I started with Brett's emails. Not hacking, I didn't need to. He'd given me access to his calendar months ago so I could help coordinate meetings. He'd never revoked it. Sloppy. But sloppiness was a luxury of the privileged. The patterns emerged quickly. Every major deal for the past 2 years had a shadow transaction. Small trades. Always just under reporting thresholds. Always timed perfectly with our confidential client negotiations. The accounts traced back to shell companies in Delaware, but the timing was unmistakable. Someone was using insider knowledge to make personal trades. Day 3. I found the connection. Richard's golf buddy ran a boutique investment fund. The same fund that consistently made prescient bets just before our deals went public. The amounts were staggering, at least $50 million in profits over 2 years. But that wasn't enough. I needed the full network. Day 5. I worked late, ordering Thai food to my desk like it was any other deadline. The janitor, Marcus, chatted with me while emptying trash bins. We'd developed a friendship over the years, bonded by our mutual invisibility. Working hard again, Ms. Madeline. You know me, Marcus, can't help myself. He laughed. You should be running this place. Maybe someday, I said, meaning something entirely different than he thought. After he left, I accessed the executive expense system, another permission that had accumulated over time. Someone had to audit the receipts when the partners were too busy. The corporate credit card statements told their own story. Dinners at private clubs where deals were discussed. Trips to the Cayman Islands coded as client development. A web of financial misconduct so normalized they didn't even try to hide it well. Day 7. The halfway point. I created my first shell company, registered in Wyoming where corporate ownership laws were opaque, then another in Nevada, a third in Delaware. All perfectly legal. All interconnected in ways that would take forensic accountants months to unravel. If they ever looked, which they wouldn't. Because why would they suspect someone who'd been loyal for 6 years? I used my lunch breaks to visit different banks, opening accounts with the cashier's checks I'd been saving from my bonuses. Small amounts, nothing suspicious. I wore different clothes each time, the kinds of forgettable outfits that make middle-aged women invisible in financial institutions. Day 9. I discovered the golden ticket. Brett, in his arrogance, had been using his company laptop for personal trading. The digital trail was all there. Cached in temporary files he didn't know existed. Screenshots of trades. Chat logs with Richard about opportunities. Even a spreadsheet, God bless his Harvard MBA, tracking his insider trading profits. I copied everything to encrypted drives, creating redundant backups. One for the SEC, one for the financial press, one for my lawyer, who I hadn't hired yet but would need soon. Day 11. I started building my exit strategy. Not just leaving, anyone could quit. I needed to ensure my departure triggered a cascade they couldn't stop. I programmed delayed emails, scheduled social media posts, created automated systems that would activate after I left. The beauty was in the timing. Everything had to hit simultaneously, creating a perfect storm of regulatory scrutiny and public scandal. But first, I had to protect my own interests. Day 13. I met with a lawyer in Denver, paying cash for the consultation. She reviewed my documentation, her expression growing more serious with each page. "This is extensive," she said finally. "And if verified, extremely damaging." "Everything is verified. I have the originals." "You understand whistleblower protections only go so far?" "I'm not planning to be a whistleblower," I said. "I'm planning to be gone." She studied me for a long moment. "The SEC offers bounties for insider trading information. Given the scope of what you found, we're talking significant compensation?" "How significant?" 10 to 30% of sanctions collected, based on these numbers." She did quick calculations. "Potentially over $1 million. I smiled. "That seems fair." Day 14 arrived with a snowstorm that shut down half the city. Perfect. I came to work as usual, wearing my best invisible outfit, gray slacks, white blouse, cardigan. The uniform of a woman who wasn't going anywhere. I spent the morning finishing my transition documents, making sure every project was detailed, every password documented, model employee to the end. Around lunch, I submitted my resignation letter, 2 weeks' notice, citing burnout and a desire to explore other opportunities. Richard called me into his office within minutes. "Madeline, this is unexpected. Surely we can work something out. A raise, perhaps? Better projects?" I sat across from him, hands folded, channeling 6 years of practiced calm. "I appreciate that, Richard. But I've made my decision. I need a change." He leaned back, relief flickering across his face. Another problem solving itself. "Well, we'll be sorry to lose you. You've been dependable. Dependable, like a printer, like a coffee machine. I'll ensure a smooth transition," I promised. That afternoon, I overheard Brett in the break room. "Madeline's leaving. Guess the pressure finally got to her. These analyst types, they always burn out eventually." "Her loss," someone replied. "Bonus season's coming up." I smiled, returning to my desk. Yes, bonus season was coming. But not the kind they expected. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of practiced normalcy. I became the model departing employee, helpful, accommodating, almost apologetic about leaving. I trained Brett on my systems, watching him half listen while scrolling through his phone. I created detailed documentation he'd never read. I smiled at the half-hearted goodbye lunches where people checked their watches and talked about quarterly projections. "You should take some time off," Richard suggested during my last week. "Maybe travel. You've never taken a real vacation." "Actually, I'm thinking about starting a small investment consultancy," I said, watching his face carefully. "Nothing that would compete with Orrin and West, of course. Just personal financial planning for individuals." He relaxed visibly. "That sounds perfect for you. Smaller scale, less pressure." Less pressure. If only he knew the pressure building beneath the surface, like tectonic plates grinding together before an earthquake. I registered my LLC, Rhodes Financial Consulting, using the Wyoming entity I'd created as the parent company. Everything above board. Everything legitimate. Just a burned-out analyst starting a tiny practice. Nothing threatening about that. My colleague Janet threw me a small going-away party on Thursday. Grocery store cake in the conference room. 15 minutes carved out of everyone's billable hours. Brett made a speech about transitions and new chapters, clearly recycled from something he'd heard at a leadership seminar. "We'll miss your attention to detail," he said, raising a paper cup of warm champagne. Nobody catches errors like Madeline. They laughed. I laughed. Everyone comfortable in their roles. That night, I met with my friend Diana, a software engineer who'd left tech to start her own company. We'd bonded years ago over being the only women in rooms full of men who explained our own work to us. She was one of the few people I trusted completely. "I need a favor," I said over wine at a quiet bar in Lodo. "A business partner for paper purposes only. Silent investor in my new consulting firm." She studied me. "Legal?" "Completely. I just need someone I trust as a co-signer on some documents. You'll own 49% of a company that will exist for about 6 months. And then I buy you out for a nice profit, and you never have to think about it again." Diana was smart enough not to ask more questions. "You were always too good for that place, Madeline." "I know," I said. "That was my mistake." My last day arrived with another snowstorm. Fitting. I packed my personal items slowly, not that there were many. A coffee mug, a small cactus, a photo of my parents, both gone now, who taught me to work hard and trust the system. Sorry, Mom and Dad. The system is broken. I made the rounds, shaking hands, accepting hollow promises to keep in touch. Brett was in a client meeting, so I left him a handwritten note. "Thanks for the opportunity to support the team. Best of luck with future deals." The security guard barely looked up when I turned in my keycard. 6 years reduced to a plastic rectangle dropped in a box. But I kept one thing, my remote access token. The little digital key that let me check emails from home. A convenience for workaholics that IT had never bothered to revoke. They'd forget about it for at least 30 days, maybe more. Corporate IT was notoriously slow about offboarding procedures. That afternoon, I sat in my home office, watching the snow fall. My laptop showed 3 screens, my new company's bank account, an encrypted folder labeled Insurance, and a draft email to an investigative journalist at the Wall Street Journal who specialized in corporate fraud. Not yet. Timing was everything. I'd left breadcrumbs in my wake, subtle things that would only make sense in hindsight. A few printed emails accidentally left in the copier. A spreadsheet saved to the shared drive with a timestamp showing I'd accessed certain files. Nothing actionable on its own. But together they'd paint a picture of someone who'd stumbled onto something big and gotten scared. The brilliant part was that it was all true. I had stumbled onto something big. I had been scared. I just hadn't been scared enough to stay quiet. My phone buzzed. Richard, probably realizing I'd been the one who knew where everything was filed. I let it go to voicemail. Rhodes Financial Consulting already had its first client, a small nonprofit I'd done pro bono work for. Legitimate income. Real services provided. But the company structure allowed for other revenue streams. Consulting fees, finder's fees, whistleblower rewards. All perfectly legal, all perfectly positioned. I pulled up Brett's Instagram. He was at Topgolf with clients, celebrating another successful quarter. In the background, I could see Richard and 2 other partners, living their best lives on a Friday afternoon while the analysts held down the fort. "Enjoy it," I whispered to the screen. "Enjoy every second." Because in 10 days, when my remote access was still active and everyone had forgotten about the quiet woman who'd burned out and left, I was going to push send on a series of emails that would change everything. The SEC would get their package, the journalist would get her story, and the automated systems I'd built would ensure that even if they tried to bury it, the information would resurface again and again. But first, I had a consulting company to build, clients to court, a paper trail of legitimate business to establish. They thought I'd left defeated, tail between my legs. Another casualty of corporate burnout. They had no idea I'd left with the keys to their kingdom, tucked quietly in my pocket, waiting for the perfect moment to turn them. The snow kept falling, covering the city in white. A clean slate, a fresh start, and the ticking of a time bomb they couldn't hear. 10 days later, I sat in a Portland hotel room, 3 states away from Colorado, watching everything unfold on multiple screens. The Pioneer Hotel's business center was empty at 3 a.m. Pacific time. perfect for monitoring the market opening on the East Coast. I'd pushed send at exactly 11:47 p.m. the night before. Not the dramatic midnight timing of movies, but calculated for maximum impact. Late enough that no one would be monitoring corporate emails. Early enough that the automated systems would distribute everything before dawn. The first domino fell at 5:15 a.m. Eastern. A financial blog picked up the anonymous tip about unusual trading patterns around Orrin & West deals. By 6:30, 3 more sites had grabbed the story. The documents I'd provided were too detailed, too damning to ignore. My phone, a new burner I'd bought with cash, buzzed with alerts from the Google News feeds I'd set up. Orrin & West under investigation for insider trading. SEC launches probe into Denver investment firm. Breaking. Whistleblower documents reveal systematic fraud at major consultancy. The Wall Street Journal article went live at 7 a.m. The journalist had done her homework, connecting dots I'd only hinted at. She'd found 3 other former employees willing to speak on background about the culture of corruption. My documentation had given them courage to finally talk. By the time markets opened, Orrin & West's stock was in free fall, down 12% in the first hour. 15 by lunch. I pulled up my remote access, still active, as I'd predicted. The internal emails were frantic. Richard demanding all-hands meetings, legal scrambling to understand the scope. Brett notably silent after his personal trading accounts were frozen by federal order. The beautiful thing about financial crime is how quickly institutions move when their money is threatened. Banks freeze accounts. Brokerages suspend trading privileges. Credit gets called in. The very system they'd exploited turned on them with mechanical efficiency. I ordered room service, eggs Benedict, and champagne. Because why not? And watched CNBC cover the unfolding scandal. They'd found Brett's Instagram posts, the ones where he'd bragged about his investment insights while golfing with clients. The optics were devastating. My encrypted phone rang. Diana. Jesus Christ, Madeline. Is this you? Is what me? I'm in Portland looking at office space for my consulting expansion. The Journal is saying the whistleblower could get a 7-figure reward. How nice for them, I said, taking a sip of champagne. Hey, I need to process that buyout we discussed. Check your email for the contract. The SEC whistleblower program was a thing of beauty. Report financial crimes. Get 10 to 30% of what they collect in penalties. My lawyer had filed the claim the day I left Orrin & West, establishing my priority position. Given the scope of fraud, the Journal was now estimating over $100 million in illegal trades. My cut would be substantial. But that was just the appetizer. Rhodes Financial Consulting had been busy. In 2 weeks, I'd secured 3 legitimate clients and 1 very special contract. A finder's fee agreement with a boutique M&A firm in New York. They specialized in distressed acquisitions, buying valuable assets from companies in crisis. Guess which company suddenly had a lot of distressed assets? I'd mapped every deal, every client relationship, every potential acquisition Orrin & West had in the pipeline. Information they'd freely shared with me over 6 years, never imagining I was anything more than furniture. Now, as their stock price crumbled and clients fled, those deals were up for grabs. My phone buzzed with a text from the M&A firm. First acquisition complete. Northwestern Medical Group deal. Your finder's fee has been wired as agreed. I checked my business account. $400,000 for a single introduction. Perfectly legal, completely above board. A consulting fee for specialized knowledge. The kind of payment men like Brett collected all the time for knowing the right people at the right moment. By noon, Pacific time. Richard had been placed on administrative leave. Brett's assets were frozen pending investigation. The other partners were lawyering up. The financial press was having a field day with the boys' club culture, especially after someone leaked the company's actual diversity numbers versus their published reports. I hadn't leaked those. That was all Karen from accounting, finally fed up and inspired by the whistleblower's courage. Dominoes falling in all directions. My new phone rang. Unknown number, Denver area code. Madeline Rhodes. Richard's voice, aged 10 years in 10 hours. We need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. If you're involved in this, we can work something out. I hung up and blocked the number. There was nothing to discuss. The evidence spoke for itself. By market close, Orrin & West had lost 40% of its value. Client defections accelerated. 2 more deals I'd identified were scooped up by competitors, earning me another $500,000 in finder's fees. I ran the final calculations in my hotel room as the sun set over Portland. Whistleblower reward, pending. But my lawyer estimated $1.2 to $1.5 million based on comparable cases. Finder's fees, $900,000 and counting. Consulting contracts, $50,000 in recurring revenue. Total, over $2 million from the wreckage of the company that had stolen my work and erased my contributions. But the money was almost besides the point. What mattered was what it represented. Every dollar was an acknowledgement of value they'd refused to see. Every transfer was a recognition of worth they'd denied. I closed my laptop and poured another glass of champagne. Tomorrow, I'd fly back to Denver to meet with my lawyer and formally establish my consulting practice. I had real clients now, legitimate business to conduct. But tonight, I sat in a hotel room in Portland, watching the city lights twinkle below, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Not satisfaction, that was too small a word. Not revenge, too petty. Freedom. That's what $1.2 million bought. Freedom from their system, their rules, their erasure. And it had only taken 14 days to plan. The aftermath unfolded with the inevitability of an avalanche. Once the first stones fell, nothing could stop the complete collapse of everything Brett and Richard had built on a foundation of lies. The SEC moved with stunning efficiency. Federal agents arrived at Orrin & West's offices on a Wednesday morning, boxes and warrants in hand. Someone filmed them wheeling out computers and file cabinets, the video going viral within hours. Orrin & West scandal trended for 3 days straight. Brett's mugshot made the front page of the Denver Post. He'd been arrested at his Cherry Creek condo, still in his monogrammed pajamas. The photo showed him disheveled, confused. The Golden Boy facade finally cracked. Federal charges for insider trading, wire fraud, conspiracy. His family's lawyers scrambled, but even they couldn't spin away the evidence. Richard lasted another week before his arrest. He tried to flee to his property in Aspen, but the FBI was waiting. The image of him in handcuffs, being led from his mountain cabin, a 10,000-square-foot monument to excess, became the defining photo of corporate greed for that quarter. I watched it all from my new office in Denver's Rhino district. A modest space, just 3 rooms. But with exposed brick and large windows that let in actual sunlight, Rhodes Financial Consulting was officially open for business, with 5 clients and a waiting list. The other partners fell like dominoes. Stuart Henley, who'd run the tech division, was caught trying to transfer assets to offshore accounts. Mark Johansson's wife filed for divorce the same day he was indicted, apparently unaware of the second family he'd been funding with embezzled profits. The entire executive team faced charges ranging from conspiracy to tax evasion. But the employees, the real employees, the ones who'd actually done the work, they landed on their feet. Karen from accounting was hired by a Big Four firm at double her salary. Emma from HR started her own consulting company. Janet, who'd organized my pathetic goodbye party, was recruited by a competitor who valued her institutional knowledge. The market responded to Orrin & West's collapse with brutal efficiency. Stock price hit penny status. Trading suspended. Bankruptcy filing inevitable. The Best Workplace for Women awards were quietly removed from their website before it went dark entirely. My lawyer called on a Thursday afternoon, her voice carefully professional. The SEC has approved your whistleblower claim. Given the scale of penalties and recovered assets, she paused for effect. $1.4 million. It should hit your account within 30 days. I thanked her calmly, professionally, then hung up and stared at the Denver skyline, feeling empty. Not disappointed, just finished. The number was just confirmation of what I'd already calculated. The real satisfaction came from smaller moments. A LinkedIn message from a young analyst at Orrin & West. Thank you for what you did. They promoted me to fill Brett's position, with actual recognition this time. An email from a client who'd pulled their money out just in time. Our entire pension fund would have been wiped out. You saved thousands of retirements. Diana visited my new office, whistling at the view. So, you ready to tell me what really happened? I found evidence of financial crimes and reported it to the appropriate authorities, I said, deadpan. Then I started a consulting firm. Very straightforward, she laughed. Right. And the fact that you made over $1 million in the process? Lucky timing. I poured her coffee from my new espresso machine. Sometimes the market rewards those who pay attention to details. The final news came 6 weeks after I'd pushed send on those emails. Brett, facing 20 years in federal prison, had flipped on everyone. His testimony revealed a network of corruption that extended to 2 other firms and a handful of government officials. The investigation expanded, dominoes falling in wider and wider circles. Richard got 15 years. His golf buddies got 10 each. The boutique investment fund that had profited from their insider knowledge was shut down. Its assets liquidated. Every dollar they'd stolen, every profit they'd made on the backs of others' work, evaporated like morning dew under federal scrutiny. I donated $200,000 to a scholarship fund for women in finance. Anonymous, of course. Set up internship programs with my clients to give young analysts real experience and actual mentorship. Started building the kind of company Orrin & West had pretended to be. The wire transfer confirmation arrived on a Tuesday. $1.4 million, clean and legal, deposited into my account. I printed the confirmation, held it for a moment, then fed it into my shredder. The number wasn't what mattered. What mattered was what it represented. The system working, for once, the way it was supposed to. That night, I had dinner alone at my favorite restaurant, a small place in Highland that made perfect ramen. The owner, Mrs. Takahashi, chatted with me about her daughter's college plans, about the weather, about anything except the collapse of Denver's most prominent investment firm. You look different, she said as she brought my check. More relaxed. I changed jobs, I said. Less stressful. She nodded approvingly. Good. Life is too short for bad jobs. I walked home through the snow, $1.4 million richer and infinitely lighter. Behind me, the Orrin & West building stood dark against the skyline, their logo removed, windows empty. A monument to what happens when arrogance meets accuracy. When the invisible become visible. When someone finally stops playing by rigged rules. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Probably another journalist, another request for an interview with the mysterious whistleblower. I deleted it without reading. Some stories don't need epilogues. Some endings are perfect in their simplicity. The guilty punished, the complicit exposed, the erased restored. $1.2 million. 14 days to plan. Worth every second. I left Denver on a Tuesday morning, exactly 3 months after pushing send on those emails. A single suitcase, a laptop bag, and a one-way ticket. The moving company would handle the rest, shipping my few possessions to a storage unit until I decided where to land. My condo sold in 4 days, cash offer, no contingencies. The buyer was a young software engineer, excited about the view and the proximity to downtown. I left her a bottle of champagne and a note. May this place bring you better luck than it brought me. Rhodes Financial Consulting would continue operating remotely. My clients didn't care where I worked from. As long as the analysis was sharp and the advice sound. The beauty of the digital age. You could run $1 million consultancy from anywhere with Wi-Fi. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not Diana, not my lawyer, not my clients. The email auto-response said I was traveling for research. Technically true. I was researching what life looked like when you weren't fighting for crumbs at someone else's table. The Uber driver to the airport chatted about the Orrin & West scandal. Can you believe it? 100 million in fraud, right under everyone's noses. Makes you wonder who else is cooking the books. Someone always knows, I said, watching the city fade in the rearview mirror. The question is whether they have the courage to speak up. Yeah, but that whistleblower? Genius. Heard they made over $1 million just for telling the truth. $1.2 million, I corrected quietly. According to the news. At the airport, I bought coffee with cash and sat at the gate, anonymous in a sea of travelers. My phone buzzed with client emails, consulting requests, LinkedIn notifications from people who suddenly wanted to connect with the founder of Rhodes Financial. I'd answer them later. Or maybe I wouldn't. For the first time in my adult life, everything was optional. The flight attendant smiled as I boarded. Business or pleasure? Neither, I said. Freedom. Portland was just the first stop. After that, maybe Seattle, Vancouver, somewhere with mountains and coffee and no one who knew my name. I'd work from hotel rooms and co-working spaces, building my company on my terms, helping clients who actually valued expertise over connections. The newspaper in my seat pocket had a small item on page 6. Oren and West assets liquidated in bankruptcy auction. Below it, an ad for their office furniture sale. Those leather chairs where partners had plotted their schemes, now available to the highest bidder. I thought about Brett, sitting in federal prison, probably still convinced he was the victim. Richard, explaining to his cellmate how the system had turned on him unfairly. All those brilliant Harvard MBAs, reduced to numbers in the Federal Bureau of Prisons database. They'd never understand what they'd really lost. Not just money or freedom, but the chance to build something real. They'd been so focused on taking credit they'd forgotten to create anything worth claiming. My laptop bag held everything that mattered, the encrypted drives with my client data, the business licenses for my company, and a single photo, me at my desk at Oren and West, barely visible behind stacks of papers, working late on another Friday night. A reminder of who I'd been and why I'd never be her again. The plane lifted off, Denver shrinking below until it was just another grid of lights in the darkness. Somewhere down there, investigators were still combing through the wreckage, finding new crimes in every file folder. The trials would go on for years, the appeals longer. But I was done looking backward, done being invisible, done playing by rules written by people who broke them the moment it suited them. $1.2 million wasn't just money, it was time, choices, the ability to say no, the power to walk away, the freedom to build something worthwhile without asking permission from people who would never see my value anyway. I ordered a gin and tonic and opened my laptop. 3 new client inquiries, all referrals from satisfied customers. A request to speak at a Women in Finance conference. An offer to write a book about corporate whistleblowing. Maybe. Maybe not. For the first time in my life, I could afford to be selective. The woman next to me glanced at my screen. Consultant? Something like that. Must be nice, working for yourself. I've been thinking about leaving my firm, but it's scary, you know. I looked at her, mid-30s, tired eyes, that familiar slouch of someone carrying other people's success on her shoulders. It's terrifying, I admitted. But staying is worse. Staying means accepting that your worth is whatever they decide to give you. Leaving means deciding for yourself. She nodded slowly. I never thought of it that way. Most people don't. That's why they win. But not always. Sometimes, the invisible become visible. Sometimes, the erased write their own stories. Sometimes, 14 days of planning can dismantle 14 years of corruption. Sometimes, you get to fly away with $1.2 million and the knowledge that everyone who underestimated you is learning exactly how much that mistake cost them. The pilot announced our descent into Portland. Below, the city lights sparkled with possibility. A new chapter, a clean slate, a life where I decided what my work was worth, and I'd never felt more free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this tale of justice and redemption resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Madeline's position? Let's discuss in the comments.